Hello, Easton, and welcome to the Rabbi's Roundtable. I'm Rabbi Peter Hyman, Rabbi at Temple B'nai Israel, and we are coming to you from the studios of MCTV in the basement of the Avalon Theater. Sorry, it's the weather. And I'm delighted to have our first guest on, Rabbi Naomi Hyman. Rabbi Hyman is running for county council, and as I've said when other candidates have been here, my goal is to help bring information to the community so we can make informed decisions. I'm not endorsing any candidate personally. My personal choices are my personal choices, and they should remain that. The other thing is, we should tell people that we are not related except by last name. She is married to someone else, Robert Hyman, and it's coincidental, but people have come up and said, "Your wife is running." I said, "Yes." No, I didn't do that. I said, no, we're not related, but Rabbi Naomi Hyman is indeed running. Naomi, it's nice to have you at the Rabbi's Roundtable.
I'm delighted to be here, Rabbi.
It's fine. Before we begin, give us some background about you, where you came from, and then we'll talk about your decision to run, why you chose, what do you think you can do, and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
I grew up in a suburb outside of Pittsburgh. My father was a small business person, and my mother was a homemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both very active in founding the synagogue that I grew up in. It was an extraordinary community. It was a community that walked its talk, particularly in terms of social justice.
Mm-hmm.
So that was modeled for me very early.
What community?
It was Monroeville, and the synagogue was
Monroeville,
Temple
yeah,
David.
sure.
Yeah.
I think I went to college with somebody from Monroeville, but that was like 60 years ago. Who remembers? So anyway, great. And how did you end up on the Eastern Shore?
It's an interesting question. I first came here in the 80s with a boyfriend whose family had a home here. He and I did not continue, but every time I tried to leave the Eastern Shore for a job or for something else, something would bring me back. So since the 80s, I have been connected with one or another of the shore counties.
Cool. And when people say to me, "How did you get to the Eastern Shore?" I said, "By great good fortune."
Exactly.
So, I believe that a lot. So you have decided to run for county council.
That's correct.
What made you decide to do that?
Well, it's a couple of things. I don't know if you know, but my grandmother was one of the only two people from her family to survive the Holocaust. And my mother grew up in a house where letters would come from Europe talking about family news, but of course also about the deteriorating circumstances for the Jewish community. And my grandmother begged her family to come to America, but they didn't want to leave everything that they knew. And they didn't think it would get as bad as it did. And eventually the letters stopped coming, and they all perished.
Yep.
So when things started turning ugly, and Mr. Trump and some of his supporters started saying some things that made me very nervous, I wondered actually if it was time for my family and I to leave. And as things got worse after the primaries through the summer, and when Mr. Trump won the election, I actually started making some tentative plans and looking at some options. But I wasn't going to go quietly. And so the day after the inauguration, I went to the Women's March in Washington. It was an amazing day.
I'm sure it was.
People of every color, religion, race, gender, sexual identity, signs. Oh my God, the signs were so funny and poignant and powerful. And at a certain point during the day, because it was a mob scene, we couldn't be anywhere we wanted to be.
I know.
And we ended up on a hill overlooking the grounds of the Capitol. And it was just this sea of people and pink hats and signs. And I turned to my actual husband, Bob Hyman, and I said to him, this is my America.
Right.
And I decided to stay and fight.
Good for you. And so you've started a formal campaign?
I started by doing some local organizing following the Women's March. And it became clear to me that I wanted to be more directly involved. And that's when I made the decision to go ahead and run.
Cool.
I made that decision last spring. I spent the next 6 months learning everything I needed to do since I'm a first-time candidate,
Yep.
and I announced a couple of weeks ago.
Cool. And what are you hearing out there? Are you hearing good stuff, bad stuff, positive, negative, need for change, things are okay the way they are?
I'm hearing concerns. I'm hearing real concern with the lack of treatment for opioid and other addictions.
Mm-hmm.
The options are very limited, and I'm hearing from addicts who want to get treated and can't find situations that they can afford, and I'm hearing from parents who've lost children. So it's great that we're raising awareness, and I really want to credit Joe Gamble for making that happen.
The sheriff has been in that chair
Yeah.
many times, and
Yeah.
You're right, he deserves a real sense of appreciation from this community. He's
Yes.
making a difference.
Now we need to be there
Yep.
to help the people
Right.
that we can.
Right.
I'm hearing concern about internet. There are many, many parts of this county where you can't get internet service even if you are willing to pay to have the cable come to your house.
I didn't know
So,
that.
yeah, there's
That's the
places,
first I've
even
heard.
in Trapp, where I know some folks who live down long roads.
Yeah.
And they have the resources and
Yeah.
they're willing to pay. But the service providers aren't willing to do it, let alone people who can't afford to pay, who have no choice at all.
Yeah.
So it's a real issue when you have,
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
yeah. Cell phone service is another one in the eastern part of the county, in Cordova and in Bruceville and in Windy Hill.
Yeah.
Cell service is terrible. Which means that aside from the fact that you have to maintain a landline and you don't really have any kind of ability to communicate in an emergency that we take for granted, it also means that you don't have data.
Oh, sure, right.
So
yeah.
you have no data by phone service, by cell service, and you have no data from internet. So it can be a real issue, particularly for kids who have to do so much of their homework online.
You're right. I had not thought about that, but if I have a question that I don't know the answer to, I now take out my phone and Google
right.
it, and that's interesting. I had not heard that.
Yeah, I would feel so hampered if that was the case.
Go ahead. Anything else?
Go for it.
Tell us about the process about the county election process, and what makes that unique and different than perhaps another kind of election.
Well, one of the things that's unique is all 5 members of the council are up for re-election at the same time. So the whole current council has the option of running again,
Right.
choosing not to for whatever reason,
Right.
but everybody will be up for
Right.
re-election.
Right.
What will happen first is a primary, and the primary will happen at the end of June. And in that primary, if there are more than 5 candidates in either the Democratic or the Republican ticket, then there'll be a runoff to see who's going to go forward. And it will be the 5 top vote getters from the Republicans, the 5 top vote getters from the Democrats, and those 5 people will go forward into the general election. Now, when you go into the voting booth on the day of the general election, you'll see 5 Democrats, you'll see 5 Republicans. At that point, you can vote for whoever you want.
Right.
And the instructions are to vote for up to 5. One of the things that sometimes happens is that people on both sides of the aisle they may only want to vote on party lines, but if their party doesn't have 5 candidates, then they will often vote for others
Right.
on the other party. And since it is since the winners are those that get the top number of votes, when we do that, we sometimes inadvertently end up having just the people that we, for very good reasons, might not want to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't want to
Interesting.
disparage
No,
anybody
but that's
who's
the
on
process.
the council.
Yeah,
That's
no.
the process.
There was nothing disparaging. I understand. That's the process, and that's a consequence of
Right.
of the way
Yes.
it's run. Okay. Oh, interesting. I've heard that, and sadly, and I'm not pleased about this one, and I try to curb it when somebody says to me, "My vote doesn't count."
Wow.
You know, and I look at them, and whether it's on a national level or a local level or a county level, I'm actually stunned by that comment, and profoundly upset by an attitude that would be communicated through those words. Thoughts?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is, I think there's a sense of hopelessness that and I am hearing this from people about the political process, that money has become such a big part of politics that there's a feeling that one's vote doesn't count if we can't back it up with significantly large donations. I don't think that's true, but many people feel that way. But it's especially not true in local elections. There is a role for money in elections, in local elections, it does matter, but people showing up and caring enough about their community to vote is what really makes the difference.
And I have always said that we have a community that's worth caring about.
Absolutely it is. You know, we share this love of place. It's a beautiful place, it's unique. There's a sense of, even with all the challenges that we may face, there's a sense of community.
Without a doubt. I've talked about that on the Rabbis Roundtable often, and each time I say something like that, it's from the heart, because I really believe it's a unique place for a lot of reasons. It doesn't mean it's perfect or that we don't have further to go, but we are in a good place, and we can move down that road.
That's right.
What are your if you should win, what are your priorities? What do you think are the most important, the top 5 things you'd like to see? And not being critical of the current system, but what you think needs to be addressed?
I think we need a stronger and more diversified economy. We rely, understandably, heavily on tourism. And in fact, we have an economic development and tourism office. The challenge can be that tourism doesn't always bring in well-paying jobs. And when you combine that with the fact that we also have an affordable housing issue, we're not necessarily creating the kinds of jobs that make Talbot County a place that non-affluent people can live. There are so many people that live in Caroline County because they can't afford to live here, even though they work here. So a more diversified economy, one that reaches beyond the vacation destinations, and public transportation to support that, housing to support that, and seeing to it that nobody is economically expendable, I think is really important. So that's one. Another one is education. I am a product of public education. I'm very proud to say that. It made a world of difference to me. I went to a school that was incredibly diverse. It was diverse socioeconomically, it was diverse racially, it was diverse religiously, and it shaped my view of the world in a way that a private education wouldn't. There's good reasons for people to choose private education, and I support that, but I don't want that to be because people feel that public education isn't what their kids can most benefit from.
With 100%. 100%.
The environment, of course, very big priority for me. Some issues the county has more limited control. One of the things that is going to be important because of that is that we have a council that can work with other counties and with other professionals in order to make the collaborative work of saving the environment work. Another important piece of it, though, are the planning and zoning issues that require a lot of attention. So right now we're celebrating the fact that Bosman and Nevitt are going to get sewer service.
Yes.
And that is really, I'm so happy. It's so good for the environment to be correcting the situation with failing sewer systems. But as soon as you create sewer hookups, you create the opportunity for development. So how are we going to ensure, and the Kern County is working on this, but it's not a one-time, this is an ongoing thing. How do you not lose the environmental gains from the sewer, but yet keep it to be an open and thriving and growing community? Similarly, there's going to be a growing push for solar power based on the trends that are happening in Annapolis. And that's going to require utility scale solar fields. Now, there is legislation in place to limit that and to control it, but again, that's going to be an ongoing situation. Yes, solar is fabulously green, but we don't want it to destroy our vibrant and bucolic landscape. So these things are very important to balance.
Yes, that's exactly correct. There's always a balance. There are a number of issues that I've been hearing around town. We won't get into it, just to reference one, medical marijuana. That's
an interesting one.
I know. I happen to think that it's a legitimate issue, and the discussion is an important discussion.
Yes.
For a lot of reasons. We won't get in now. We can come back and talk about that at another time. But there are all these other issues that are impactful to our well-being and our way of life and all sorts of things. So
local matters so much, and people don't realize it.
Absolutely.
You asked me for a few things, and I just don't want us to end that topic before I talk about what in many ways is the issue that's nearest and dearest to my heart, and that is making sure that Talbot County is a safe and welcoming community.
Great.
As you well know, there are communities that are living in fear right now.
Yes.
And that needs to change.
I couldn't agree with you more. After the summer's tragedy in Charlottesville, we did a service. There were over 250 people who came. It was a service in the park in Oxford. And while it was a Friday night and I was doing it primarily for the congregation, to this day it gives me goosebumps when I think about it. 250 people, all shades, all kinds of folk from our community came to stand in solidarity and make a response to that tragedy and that obscenity. And that was a profoundly uplifting moment set against a backdrop of tragedy and sadness and what I found reprehensible. So that's important. I would agree with you.
And there are fabulous things happening in the community, one of which is the conversation on race, which you've been instrumental in developing. And I think those things need to be uplifted. There's often things going on that don't get communicated widely. And I would like to see councils going forward take it upon themselves to explain some of what's going on and why.
That's good. I would agree with that. I know that this is the 200th anniversary of Frederick Douglass.
I'm excited about it.
I am too. There's all that kind of really great opportunity for the entire community to get involved, to embrace not only Frederick Douglass as a son of this area, but to perpetuate his vision and his influence and his wisdom. Harriet Lowry and Eric have been on the Rabbi's Roundtable often, and she's heading it. So there's opportunity to, again, strengthen the community and the fabric of the community and make it, as you just said, a continuingly safe place.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Frederick Douglass because I have one particular quote from him that I have hanging on my desk, and that is, "I will work with anyone to do good, and I will work with no one to do evil."
Yep. Not much to say after that, good for you. So anyway, we have been talking with Naomi Hyman. Naomi is running for a seat on Talbot County Council. The election is...
June 26th is the primary, and November
5th or 6th.
6th, I think.
I think so. Anyway, we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
We will watch your progress and see where it goes, and hopefully it will accrue to your good and our good. Easton, we will be back in a moment.
We are MCTV, Midshore Community Television. We want your help in making our station more robust so that we can better serve the residents of Talbot County. So, how can you help? If you are already making video content, submit that content for broadcast to the station. It's free. Are you involved in events, shows, or lectures that would be of interest to the community? We can work with you to figure out the best way to capture those events for airing on MCTV, be it training, equipment rental, or hiring our production staff to film at a reasonable rate. Do you want to produce your own show? Let us help you get started. Come be a part of this valuable community resource. Email the station at nick@avalonfoundation.org or visit us in the basement of the historic Avalon Theater at 40 East Dover Street in downtown Easton.
And welcome back to the Rabbi's Roundtable. I'm Rabbi Peter Hyman, Rabbi at Temple B'nai Israel in Easton, Maryland, and we are in the studios of MCTV. And I have a short second session where I just want to share some information about what's coming up at Temple B'nai Israel in February. Many of you know that in February we sponsor the Susan and Barry Coe February lecture series. It has been very successful over the years, and this year the topic is, I think, and others have told me, very interesting: mysticism in a non-mystical world. And as you know, the lectures are scholarly and theme-driven. We have 3 speakers this year, and I'll explain why 3 and not 4 in a moment. The first speaker, all 3, by the way, are very fine scholars and seasoned, erudite colleagues. The first lecture, which will be on February 7th, will be delivered by my friend and my colleague, Rabbi Arnold Bienstock. Rabbi Bienstock, some of you may know him, is from Salisbury, and he is going to talk about the mystical mystique. He's going to explore the origins of mysticism in biblical interpretation, and the session will focus on Kabbalah, which is the term in Judaism for mysticism, and its relationship to the developing religion. And he will also look at the resurgence and the reemergence of mysticism, both nationally and internationally in religious spheres. Arnie's a great scholar. He is a Columbia-educated student and very bright, and he will have really interesting concepts to share with us. On February 14th, yes, Valentine's Day, Rabbi Don Berlin, many of you know Rabbi Berlin, and his wife Norma are residents of St. Michael's. Rabbi Berlin is going to talk about how do Reformed Jews encounter mysticism, possible, necessary, or unreal, and actually he's going to expand it to deal with how do modern liberal religion folk deal with the whole notion of mysticism. This too shall be interesting. There's a brochure. If anybody's interested, you can call Temple and we will be glad to send you a brochure with all of this information in it. Don says he's going to deal with topics such as, is mysticism dangerous to good mental health? Are there real urges for modern folk who want to be religious to consider mysticism? And are we able to imagine mysticism in our own lives? It's going to be a fascinating and insightful presentation. And then on February 21st, the really superb scholar, Rabbi Amy Scheinerman. Rabbi Scheinerman lives in Baltimore. She is a well-known lecturer, and she's going to be talking specifically about the mystical lens, or viewing the Garden of Eden through the mystical lens. She's going to do some text study, and it's going to be really quite fascinating and interesting. Now, the reason that there are only 3 lectures instead of 4 is because on February 28th, the evening of February 28th, and all the lectures are on Wednesdays, the 7th, the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th, we will not have a lecture, but we will celebrate the Festival of Purim, which is a very fun holiday where we read the book of Esther. We traditionally dress up in costumes. We use noisemakers. Some of you who know the book of Esther know that the villain, his name is Haman. When Haman's name is mentioned, we drown it out by making noise, stamping feet, booing, hissing. The kids come, it's a lot of fun. And just so you'll know, it is now a tradition at Temple B'nai Israel that the Purim celebration is augmented by the really terrific music provided by the Max Murray Trio. They have come in for the last several years. I did a rewrite of the story of Esther. I've truncated it and punctuated certain spots with classical jazz tunes. For instance, when Esther makes her first appearance, I have Max and the trio play Satin Doll. Or when Haman is finally dealt with at the end, they will do Don't Get Around Much Anymore. I know, it's my sick attempt at being funny. Anyway, we invite you to, if you're interested, to come to the Purim celebration on Wednesday night, February 28th. That starts at 7:30, as well as all the lectures on the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st for this year's Susan and Barry Coe February lecture series at Temple B'nai Israel. Scott will put up more information on the screen. If you are interested, please, the only thing we ask you to do is call Temple. The phone number is 410-822-0553, 410-822-0553, and speak with Nancy, our administrative assistant, and put your name on the list for attending any and all of the lectures. Easton, we will see you next time on the Rabbi's Roundtable. Thanks for watching.